you have a finite resource, the less you let out, the higher the price goes. So if you decide to liquidate it, the price goes down. So there's no incentive for land trusts to sell the resource cheaply. Anyway, this is part of the collecting rental, the rental value of forest or of agricultural land or indeed urban land. It encourages the non-extractive industry, ecotourism, other things, local production, value-added forest conservation. Manufacturing, again, it encourages local production because we're doing the true cost of fossil fuels. Everything is now made in China because it's artificially subsidized by future generations and other species because it's artificially inexpensive fossil fuels. Sustainable production, it encourages businesses to use less and less oil, less and less dirty electricity. And niche marketing, because you have, instead of the global monoculture of products, you will have local interesting products because it's made by local people who know how to make a big buck. There's two ways of making money. One is to build a globally undifferentiated product and ship it all over the planet. The other way is to build a locally unique product that is locally interesting and valued locally. And that is being encouraged if we do this kind of rental collection, and the global undifferentiated product will be discouraged. Reduce bubble economics. Have you guys reading the paper these days? The American real estate market is, the bubble is starting to burst. Predicted by people who understand how economic rent is collected. It's an 18-year real estate bubble, and now it's happening again. So, if you should have sold your house last year and buy it back again 2 years from now if you want to make a killing as the market recovers. You sell your house before it tops out. I shouldn't be giving you this advice, should I? All right, transportation, again, very relevant to municipalities. Again, to finance infrastructure, you collect the upkick that the infrastructure produces, which doesn't belong to the people who own the land around the infrastructure because they didn't lift a finger to create it. It should go into financing the initial infrastructure. Creates walkable community neighborhoods linked by transit. It creates optimal population density. That's an interesting one. In old Toronto, downtown Toronto, there's about 8,000 people per hectare. No, per square kilometer. No, I screwed it up. Anyway, that is what it takes to have a walkable community. If you have less than optimal density, you need car-dependent sprawl. If you have over-density, you need tall buildings, and that's no good either. Nobody wants to live in tall buildings. So when you have too much density, people want to move away and the land price goes down. If you have not enough density, then it becomes uninteresting culturally and not so many people want to live there. They want to live where you have optimal density, where you can walk to cafes or walk to shopping and work, etc. It conserves land for nature. There's a big push now in Australia that they want to release land in the fringes around Melbourne. More sprawl, more car-dependent sprawl because land is cheaper out there, but you have to buy another car to get back. You waste half your life in transit and help pollute the air even more. I was in Sydney the other day getting a ride to the plane, and the air was disgusting. There's a big layer of yellow smog everywhere. It reminded me of Toronto, where I come from. I thought, ugh. Smart growth is another term. So what we want, what I'm talking about is a revenue-neutral tax shift off of incomes, businesses, and consumption onto sites, sources, and sinks. Because it's revenue-neutral, we want governments to be funded the way they are now, roughly. Some of us want more taxation a little bit, some of us want a little less, but generally we're pretty happy with the amount of taxation because we want a certain amount of services. And so the services that we do have should be funded this way and not by incomes and business taxes. Now, if we did that entire tax shift, we may still not create enough revenue to eliminate poverty. And to do that, we could perhaps levy more on resources and pollution and land in order to make sure every one of our citizens has their fair share of the global commons. If you don't own land or pollute or use resources, you should be compensated by those who do. It's your birthright. Equity is critical in order to finally get to make poverty history, as the expression goes these days. And what we need to do is modernize economics. Everybody wants to be modern, don't you? So that means our economic system has to serve our moral and ethical system. we now have this moral and ethical system that we should not have poverty. We should have global equity. And of course, we should take care of the planet. So we need an economic system that serves the needs of what we need, what we decide we want. Make poverty history and allow for mutual provision. Respect future generations. Future generations should be part of the economic framework, and they're not. Anyway, that's the general rub here. One last little thing is, I used to be always champion community economic development. That's what we had to do. We had to develop our communities. But I had no concept that all wealth collapses into land, and the landowners collect all the wealth. So in Toronto, the downtown Toronto, there's a lot of rundown areas, and we always said we need CED, community economic development. And that meant, you know, getting people to move down there and getting artists down there, and, you know, the starving artists would move down there, and we'd give them some money to move down there and put up their studio. And these starving artists would start producing marvelous art, and they'd sell a little bit of it, and they'd pay the rent. But as soon as they started doing that, it became attractive to live there. And everyone wanted to live where the starving artists were living, because they wanted to live in a loft, right? Just like the artists, they're the posers. The posers come in. So what happens as soon as everyone wants to live there, up go the land prices. Who owns the land? Not the starving artists. They just rent. And so the starving artists have to move farther out. They had to move to another rundown area, and the same thing would happen again. They would gentrify it, make it exciting, up would go the land taxes. The starving artists couldn't afford the rent, because the landowners, a small number of them, would collect all the value, the capital gains, and the artists would have to move out farther again. This is a continuing spiral. Not only artists, but the poor as well, same problem. Let's say the poor are really enterprising. You know, they're working for peanuts, they can barely get it together, but they're morally strong, and they improve the quality of their community. They can't afford the land because it costs $500,000 for a small lot. So they, by the sweat of their brow and their moral fortitude, they improve the quality of life. Up goes the land value, the poor have to move out to some other rundown part. And then they get ground down and they say, oh, screw it, I'm never going to get out of this mess. So, you know, and that's when you have grinding cyclical poverty. Probably, hands up if you own the land you live in, own the land you live on.
Percentage of it?
There's roughly 65% of Australians own the land they live on. So the 65% of people who own their own land are in an unspoken cartel, a land cartel, just like OPEC. They control most of the oil. The people who own the land in Melbourne have a cartel, and you guys are pitted against the 35% of people who don't own land. The 65 who do own land will slowly get richer and richer as the land increases in wealth every year by the tune of 5 or 6% per year. That's what happened with me. In 10 years, we accumulated $100,000 that we didn't own, we didn't earn. So you people, you terrible, unfair people who own your own land, are putting the shaft to the 35% in Melbourne who don't own land.
So we should get shafted instead, or should we wait until the fair system arrives?
No, everyone in Melbourne should have access to the wealth that land generates.